and welcome to Lose Weight with Me, which is basically my daily vlog slash discussion on how you can improve your life while simultaneously I'm working to lose weight, and you could potentially do that as well. This is part of a program that I actually am working with somebody on, a guy named Jesse from Walk Talk Vent. He created a challenge, and I basically told him I'd participate in the challenge because I think it was a pretty good challenge, all things considered. And it's one of the ways in which we're talking about working together to create better success for both of us. So I was like, hey, I can do that. I can do a daily live to tell people how things are going and just continue to educate as best I can on how to improve your life. And today's episode is about fixing your life. So basically, there comes a point in your life where you see that things are not going exactly how you expected. For me, that actually happened during college. Basically, I was reaching the end of my 2 years at Evergreen to get my bachelor's degree, and my parents were going through a pretty gnarly divorce. So I was feeling a little bit unstable in that environment. And for years, I'd been trying to build up some sort of business. That had always been my desire, to own my own business, to be free financially, to where I didn't have to worry about money anymore, so that I could focus on things that truly mattered to me. And when my parents got divorced, that kind of threw a wrench in things. Not necessarily because they made life untenable, it felt very unstable. So I kind of got scared, and I made a decision where I was like, you know what? I need to make sure that I'm taken care of. I need to make sure that I have enough to get by. So I opted to go get a job rather than pursuing building a business like I discussed with my parents previously. And I asked myself the question, what job wouldn't I hate? Now, this is not the best question to ask yourself when getting a job, generally speaking. But for me, I never liked the idea of having a job. To me, a job is basically like prison, except it's voluntary. So you're voluntarily imprisoning yourself. But at the same time, if you don't have a job, if you're not making money, how are you supposed to get by? So it kind of feels like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I didn't really see another out. So the only option I had was, what job wouldn't I hate? What would I be willing to do to bring money in that, it still feels like a sacrifice, but at least it wouldn't suck horribly for the rest of time. Now, there are several reasons why I don't like jobs. Primarily, it stems around emotional traumas. And like my first job, I had to miss Christmas. And on top of that, when I was young, we had an exchange student who suddenly died of a brain tumor. And that experience reminded me how fleeting life was. I was only 7 at the time, but it was a very powerful experience. So then going into high school and having to miss an important family function was very traumatizing as well. And from that point on, I was basically saying to myself, I never want to be in this position again. I want to be able to be there for the people that I care about. They're the most important thing. And unfortunately, I still haven't quite figured out how to figure this one out. But all things considered, I'm still working toward it. And that's kind of what most of us are going to have to do at some point, where our life's just not going the way that we expected. And going into semi truck driving, I think, was extremely beneficial for me in many ways because it gave me a lot of time to think. My entire world basically fell apart during that time, where it kind of was like a dark night of the soul. And I literally broke down my entire belief structures to a very basic fundamental belief, which was, for me, God is love. And that meant that a lot of the religion I'd been raised with didn't really correlate with what I believed anymore. And I had to basically reinvent myself entirely during that time, because everything I knew basically didn't work anymore. So I went through a very traumatic, dark kind of experience, and I don't necessarily think that's the most fun thing to do, and I wouldn't recommend it to somebody if they can go any other way. But it did give me some really powerful information to share and help guide other people. So in the end, I'm very grateful for that experience because it made me who I am, and that allows me to help other people who are struggling with things like that. So the first thing that you need to do when you're trying to fix your life, when you're trying to figure out how to create the kind of future that you want, is to first figure out what it is that you want. A lot of us, I think, make our decisions based upon what we don't want. where we say, well, I don't want that experience. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to have that life. And while that's helpful as far as clarifying things, it's not actually particularly helpful as far as giving you a direction to go in. It's kind of like this concept of, if you don't know the destination, how do you know when you arrived? So that's the basic premise of this concept as well. So you have to first figure out where you want to go. And there are what I call 6 avenues of desire. So basically 6 areas in your life where you're wanting to change something. And it's not necessarily you want to change all of them all the time, but there are 6 avenues you can look at to see what things you want to change in your life. Now, there are 3 that I call the external avenues of desire, which are probably what most people are going to be focused on most of the time, because that's going to be your finances, your physical health, and your relationships. So those are pretty big things, and you're likely going to want something in each of those categories at any given time. And that could be something specific or it could be something general, but any way you look at it, you're going to want something in that avenue. For example, in my relationship, I would like to get pregnant again in the near future. And that requires financial stability, which is something that we actually struggle with. But that leads to the secondary desire. So the desire is pregnancy, but I don't want to have another baby until we have financial stability. So that leads to my financial desire. And then I have the desire to lose weight, which is something that I'm working on. And I've actually managed to also figure out how I'm going to take that pursuit and turn it into a financial thing. So for me, finances is where I'm focused right now, because that's going to give me the ability to focus on the true desire that I can't immediately work on, which is having another child. So you're going to have something similar. It is going to differ depending on what you're wanting specifically. You may not be married, so you may be wanting to find love, or you may want to have more friends, or maybe you want to have a better relationship with your family, or maybe you want to learn how to forgive somebody who traumatized you in the past. These are all things that fall into the relationship category. But then you may be somebody who's looking to lose weight, and probably if you're watching this video, that's exactly who you are, where you're coming on walks with me or with Jesse to motivate you basically to keep moving toward your health goals. And that's a good thing. We all need to be surrounded by people who share our goals, who are moving in the same direction, because they pretty much ensure that we're going to reach that destination, which is one of the things that most of us don't give enough credit to. This idea of who you associate with really influences your life. But if you can surround yourself with people who are moving in the same direction, whether they're ahead of you and have achieved what you desire, or whether they're just on the path with you, that association is still going to help you get to where you want to go. So that's really important. And then as far as financial goals are concerned, some of you may be financially stable, some of you may be extremely wealthy. So you may not have necessarily the same financial desire that I think the majority of the world does have, but I think most of us have some kind of financial goal that we're dealing with. Now, any avenue of desire, you may not necessarily have something that you want to achieve in. So if you don't have something you want to achieve in one of those categories, that's totally fine. You can just work on maintaining what you already have, which is still going to take investment. It's still good to go out and do walks and stuff when you're already fit and healthy. It's still good to invest time into your relationships, and it's still good to ensure that you've got your finances in order and that you have things in place that prevent you from running into disaster later. So doing that is always a great idea. Now, as far as how to get those things, you're going to run into snags if you don't work on the internal avenues of desire, which are going to be your emotions, your spiritual life, and your mental life, your mental development. So mental development is more about what you know. The spiritual side is what you believe, and the emotional side is how you feel. So you may want to, for example, become somebody that you admire. That would likely be a mental pursuit, where you're going to try to find books or find teachers who can teach you how to do this kind of thing. And then when it comes to the spiritual stuff, you want to believe in yourself more, which is primarily going to come about through finding people who inspire you, finding things that inspire you, doing things to take care of yourself, using things like affirmations to instill the belief in you, and that kind of thing. And then as far as emotional adjustments go, or the emotional avenue goes, you may want to be less angry. So then you have to learn how to control your emotions. You have to learn how to understand what your emotions are telling you. So these things can play a big role in and how well you achieve the external desires. But all of these things kind of interact with each other, but they are distinct, which is why I have the 6 avenues of desire. So any way you look at it, you have to first figure out what it is that you want, and you have those 6 avenues at which to look at. And then once you have that destination, your chances of actually achieving it go up significantly. And it's usually going to serve you better to be aimed towards something rather than away from something. Because if you're just running away, you're kind of blindly hurtling into the future. Whereas if you're aiming at something, you're taking yourself from where you are and channeling it toward a particular eventuality, which is going to serve you a lot better. The challenge that most of us face on this pursuit, though, is that we don't really know how to prioritize. And the reason we don't know how to prioritize is because life tends to fall into 4 different categories. And these are the categories that I don't remember the author, but he talks about these in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where you have the urgent, important stuff, you have the urgent, non important stuff, then you have the non urgent, important stuff, and the non urgent, non important stuff. And that may seem a little complicated, but all things considered, the avenues we tend to spend most of our time in are the least productive avenues or the least productive categories to spend our time in, which are the urgent, non important category and the non urgent, non important category. And the reason for this is because the urgent and important category is primarily just a result of not doing the non urgent but important stuff. So your car breaks down because you didn't take it to the mechanic every 3 months. And now you have to figure out how to get a new car so you can get to work tomorrow. That would fall into the urgent, important category. But those are kind of like the disaster moments that aren't going to happen all the time. Now, there are things that do happen daily that can fall into that category, such as feeding your children who are screaming or changing their diapers. That's something I have to deal with. But realistically, they don't tend to take a whole lot of time if they happen on a daily basis, versus if you have a truly disastrous moment, it may take you a long time to figure it out because you have to be so focused intensely on trying to figure out how to fix that particular problem. But once again, they're not very common. These are things that happen because you didn't take care of what you know you needed to take care of, which is the important but non urgent category. And that's primarily where we should be focusing most of our time if we want to have a better life, which is not necessarily an easy thing to do. And part of that is because we don't necessarily know what steps we need to be taking to get the life that we want to have. So that can be a little bit challenging. But it's hard to ignore the urgent and unimportant stuff because it's right in your face. So things like doing the dishes fall into this category because you can see it, it bugs you, and now you want to do those dishes just so that the house can be cleaned. Cleaning the house is also a prime example of this. And that's not to say that it shouldn't be done. Like, we all live better if we have a clean environment. We all tend to enjoy our lives more if we're not ill because our dishes are covered in mold. So doing that kind of stuff is beneficial, and I'm not telling you not to do that. Just that doing the dishes generally is going to be lower priority than, say, ensuring that you're going out to talk to people so you can get sales. And the sales can be put off, which is one of the reasons why we tend to choose the dishes over the sales. But the sales are going to get you the result you're looking for, whereas the dishes are not. So it's not that you shouldn't do these things, just that you should be mindful about what tasks are actually important versus what's just urgent. So our phones are horrible at keeping us in this urgent but non-important category where we get bings or pings every time we get a new text or an email, and we immediately go to our phone because it's right there in our face yelling at us, basically. So the urgency of that tends to draw us in, but it's not necessarily productive stuff. Now, you may be somebody who does actually need to do responses because you're building a business or something. So having your notifications on your phone is helpful because you can get back to those potential clients via email or text whenever that comes up. But most of us aren't going to be dealing with that. Most of us are going to be getting things that could be taken care of later, which is exactly why it's so difficult in our modern society to keep focused because we keep getting these notifications telling us, hey, look at me, when it's not actually helping us in the long run to do those things and to check them out when we could be focused on something else. Now, the second category that we tend to spend a lot of time in is the non-urgent, non-important category. And this is primarily because we're burnt out from spending all of our time doing the urgent stuff. And I don't think anybody necessarily likes to do the urgent stuff because it feels chaotic and sporadic and uncomfortable. But that's where we spend most of our time. And that's one of the reasons why social media, for example, tends to be kind of harmful, is because it leads to a level of burnout. So then we try to compensate for that by finding ways to relax. So doing things like watching TV or playing video games would fall into the category of non-urgent, non-important stuff, where you enjoy it and it may bring a certain level of relaxation, but it's not actually moving your life forward. We could all probably live our entire lives without watching TV or playing video games and be totally fine. But we like to do those things. And that's not to say that you can't do those things, just that it's not urgent and it's not important. So relaxation, I think, is great. You should totally figure out how to relax at times. But if you want to become a better person and you want to fix your life and you want to move forward in a particular direction and meet your goals, then you have to at least spend some of the allotted time you put into the other categories to the non-urgent but important tasks. And of those, you need to figure out which goal you want to meet the most, and then figure out which steps you want to take. So whether that goal is financial, physical, or relational, you have to decide which one is your biggest priority. For me, that would be the financial. And then you have to determine what steps will actually get you to where you want to be. So for me, that's figuring out YouTube and posting videos and trying to create an audience. And that actually serves both my immediate goal and my long-term goal, because my long-term goal is to create a better sense of community, to have my family and my, chosen heart family too, my tribe, and be around them and surrounded by people that I genuinely care about. So YouTube also helps with that bigger goal, with that long-term goal, but it also helps me move toward that financial goal, because I've determined that I would like to build my business via social media. And I've done many different types of social media and found that I really enjoy being on camera. I really like making long form content because I feel like I have a lot to say. I have a lot to contribute to the world. And if I can create an audience who really appreciates what I have to offer, then pretty much everything else can be figured out from that point. I really don't think it's going to be all that difficult to figure all the rest of this stuff out if I have my people with me, because it won't just be me at that point. They will be helping me achieve my goals. I will be helping them achieve your goals, and it's a symbiotic relationship. So, all things considered, I think that's an excellent path for me to follow. And that's one of the reasons why I've chosen this path. But I do know that there have been many, many false starts where I tried to start businesses or different ventures via other mechanisms and they failed. And so that leads us to the idea of whatever path you choose, whatever steps you decide to take, you have to keep at them. And this is the idea of, now that you have your destination in mind, you have to keep going till you get there, because you're not going to reach New York if you leave California, drive halfway, and then decide your dream is a hopeless dream and then turn around. You have to keep going until you get there. And I know the temptation to quit, because I've done it many, many times. I've quit over and over and over and over and over again, to such a degree that I'm actually a little ashamed of it. I didn't understand the normal rate at which you can achieve something. So creating a business, for example, expect to be working at it for 2 to 5 years at least, if not 10 to 20, depending on the business you go into. it's not a quick thing. You can't do this in 6 months. So if you're not seeing results in 6 months, don't freak out. And that's something that it took me a long time to understand, where I would work at something for 6 months, wouldn't see the results, and then think, well, this is clearly not for me. I'm obviously not made to do this. And then I would abandon the project. But abandoning the project really isn't a solution, because I turned around and went back. Now you got to start all over again. That's not helpful. So rather than starting over again, I always encourage people to ask themselves this question, which is this goal really something I care about? And if it is something that you genuinely care about, there is no quit. There is continue until you reach it. And yes, you may never reach it. There's no guarantees that you will reach it. But at the same time, if you keep going, you will eventually figure out how to succeed. It's kind of inevitable. So that you feel you're inadequate time, you quitting are two very things. I know Peterson has this idea of just quitting, really doing. And I actually think that's correct. And that to be philosophy now as far as pursuing, because I want to build a business. I have the business level of learning that needs to be done. It's massive learning that pretty much everybody has to go through too. So I'm going through that. Me not quitting means I'm going to keep working at, until I figure out that pivoting means that I may change the way in which I approach YouTube. For example, I've been posting a video a day basically for a little over a month. There was one video that I actually made proud again. So if you look at my channel, it's not necessarily 3 days straight of content, but I have been posting one video a day for quite a while. And it took me a minute to realize that I've already been doing this for over a month, so that was interesting. But as I reflect on what I have accomplished with that so far, it's got me thinking, well, how could I do this better? How could I approach this in a way that gets better results? Can I approach this in a way that gets better results? And as I come up with different ideas and different solutions, I then decide, okay, I'm going to try that one out. I'm going to test out that path. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to see how this one plays out. Approaching it in the same way, which is ultimately the difference between quitting and pivoting, where quitting is giving up entirely, choosing to switch to a different social media platform, for example, would be quitting. Whereas YouTube and pivoting is more about angle and how I'm going about doing what I need to do in order to achieve the ultimate success that I'm looking for. So know that whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, if it's truly important to you, it is worth pursuing, and it's worth pursuing until you reach that goal, whatever it is. I'm going to continue to build YouTube until I find the success that I'm looking for. And more than likely, I will continue after that point. But by the time I reach the level of success I'm looking for, I'll probably bring on a team to help me with this stuff, because there is a lot I'm not good at. And I know that many people look at me and they see my self assurance and they assume that I've got everything figured out. And that's just not true. You know, nobody's got it all figured out. Nobody can tell you how to live your life. It's a constant process. We're all constantly learning, we're all becoming something more. So there's no end point. Nobody's got it figured out. There are just people who believe in you, and that's my role. I'm this person who believes in you and your capability, and I believe that you have the potential to reach your goals. And that's what you need in order to reach your goals, because you need somebody who can say, I know you can do it. And that's not actually all that common. So that's a skill that I have. That's something that people comment on about me all the time. It's actually the thing my husband loved about me most when he met me, was that I could accept him right where he was. I didn't need him to change. I didn't need him to become something else. That's apparently a skill of mine. And it's not necessarily one I was born with. It's one that I cultivated primarily through that dark night of the soul that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. But all things considered, it is something that I'm very proud of. I like that I can be that person. I like that I can help other people. I like that I can be a positive influence, and I like that I can inspire and share my heart. So I really enjoy playing that role. I really enjoy being this person, but at the same time, I can only be as effective as my audience allows me to be. They have to tell me what they need from me because I can't figure that out on my own. This is not the me show. This is actually the you show, and I'm just the face. I'm just here to help you achieve your ends. So here I am doing my best, but ultimately I kind of need the back and forth. I need the people who will interact with me in order for me to actually be beneficial to a greater society. Because ultimately, I am very ineffective just by myself. And I say that with a certain level of humility, but also a certain level of pride, I guess, where I understand this world is meant to be lived together. We are meant to create more than what we as individuals can do. This is why we all have different skills and talents, because together we can accomplish something that we couldn't have done individually. And ultimately, that's the world I want to live in. I want to live in a world where people can fully utilize their skills and talents. And that's what I'm working toward, where I can be the servant that I want to be for other people, where I can help the most people possible create better lives and then have a better life myself as a result. I ultimately want more friends. I want people who want to spend life with me, not necessarily as romantic partners. I've already got that. But I want to have a family far beyond just me and my husband or just me and my blood relatives, because I think family is meant to be bigger. I think we're supposed to have a greater community. And that's what I want for my life. Now, that's not to say that it's the only path. And that's something that's really important to note, even with your own life, is that there are no wrong choices. There are just the choices you make and the choices you don't. My husband, he's worried all the time that he's going to make the wrong decision, that he's going to choose the wrong path, and that it's going to lead him astray. But I keep telling him there is no wrong path. There's no messing up in life. There's just choosing one path over another. And you don't have to weigh the pros and cons as much as you think. There is no perfect path for you. There's just a path that you choose. And if you choose a path and you walk down it, you will eventually find your destination. But if you stay at the crossroads, paralyzed by the choice, you won't reach the destination because now you're stuck. You're sitting there wondering which path is the best one. Either path is going to require you to overcome challenges. Either path is going to have its ups and downs. Either path is going to be challenging in some way. Now, there are some paths that are better trodden than others. For example, if you're trying to get money, getting a job is by far the best worn path because most people have followed that path. And there's a very direct trail that's been blazed before you. It's a very wide road. You can see pretty much as far as you want down it. You don't see the obstacles so much. Whereas the path of entrepreneurship, there's roots that you can see poking up, and you're not entirely sure that that path exists, other than it's kind of peeking around the tree over there. But if you choose to go that way, you still will reach your destination eventually, or you'll die. But ultimately, isn't it worth pursuing if that's something you truly want? Because for me, living the 9 to 5 life, dedicating myself to building somebody else's dream, that's not a path I want to follow. That's not a path I want to live. That's something that I will regret doing for the rest of my life. Whereas choosing the harder path, the one that leads me to the life I truly desire, is well worth the sacrifice for me. I think that would be very fulfilling. I feel like my life will be much better if I do that. And not everybody feels that way, which is fine. Not everybody needs to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody needs to build a business. Not everybody needs to worry about their fitness. Not everybody wants to be married. We all get to choose our path. We all get to choose which direction we go in, and any path you choose is primarily fine. Like, I wouldn't recommend going down the murderer path or serial killer path. That's something that we as a society have decided is not okay. So there are certain things that I don't recommend and I don't think are a good idea. But within the legal system, pretty much any path you choose is going to be fine. So you don't have to worry about whether or not the path you take is going to get you to where you want to go. However, if the end result that you can predict from that path is not the goal that you want, don't take that path, no matter how pretty. Don't look at, I have a coach who says this, where he's like, look at where the ladder ends up before you decide to climb it. It doesn't matter what the wood looks like or whether it's oak or cedar, because ultimately it's where it's heading that matters. So if it's not propped up against the building you want to be on top of, don't climb the ladder. And that's the same idea that I'm talking about here. Don't go down the path that leads you to where you don't want to go, no matter how pretty it is, no matter how well trodden it is, because that's not the life you want to live. You've decided at this point what life you want to live, assuming you're following along with this video and asking yourself these questions. So now that you know where you want to go, make sure you're headed in the right direction. If your destination is to the west, don't go to the east. Just basic concept. So, all things considered, there is no wrong here. You just have to keep going until you reach your goal. You're not going to choose a wrong path. And if you look at where you're heading, you're more likely to reach it faster. Versus if you choose a wrong path or a wrong path, and then you realize, oh, this is heading in the wrong direction. Now you got to choose a different fork because it's not necessarily leading you where you thought it was. And that would be a pivot where you're going, oh, well, I'm on the right road, but I think I need to take the next turn. So that would be the pivot example where you're not quitting, you're not turning around and going back home, but you are deciding again which path you want to follow and then pursuing that instead. So ultimately, that is how I recommend people fix their lives. I recommend that you go about changing things to meet your desire, to create a more fulfilling life for yourself and for everybody else, the rest of the world, to make a better society. There are any number of positive things that occur when you take control of your life. Don't live your life based on fear. It's a horrible choice. I can tell you that much. I've regretted every decision I've ever made out of fear. So when you decide to run towards something rather than away, your life gets so much better. Talk to you later.